Hi everyone, Marcos Colon, online editor with SC Magazine, and thank you so much for being in focus with us today. Joining me is Jeff Aboud, Technology and Solutions Evangelist at Cisco. Cisco's been doing some really interesting work regarding the Internet of Things, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I guess a fitting place to start is how many things are actually involved with the Internet of Things? It seems as though that it runs the gamut of technology as a whole, from critical infrastructure to everyday home appliances to even wearables.
There's no real agreement throughout the industry. Cisco says, hey, by 2020, there's going to be 50 billion devices. I've seen other research that says, it's going to be about 25 billion. Some say 30 billion. And then we all have kind of this different view of, hey, when did this point of inflection happen? When did the number of devices outweigh and kind of overcome the number of men, women, and children on the planet? Some say it was earlier, about 2013. We think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't really matter, because what we all universally agree is that the point of inflection has already occurred, which means that the Internet of Things is real, and it's real today. It's not some sci-fi thing that's sometime in the future, and that is growing at a really rapid pace to the tune of billions and billions of devices. And I think a lot of it comes in how you count. Are we talking about things, physical things I'm holding, like my cell phone, my tablets, things like that, wearables like you mentioned, or are we talking about sensors? To be honest, the vast majority of that number comes from sensors. And that's really going to be one of the most interesting spaces that we see over the next several years.
All right, now our world is controlled by computers now more than ever before. Now when you take into account the consumerization of IT, mobility in the workplace, what are some of the things that security practitioners at organizations should hone in on when it comes to grappling with the challenges that are presented with the Internet of Things?
You're right. I mean, everything's controlled by computers and sensors already. I mean, if you think about your car today, if it's less than 5 years old, has hundreds of sensors already. The difference is when they're IoT enabled, they're actually going to function as a network of sensors, so they can actually take all the data that's otherwise fairly useless, that each of those sensors deploys and actually does something with. You can actually have all those sensors integrated and networked together, so you now take all that data, that individualized data, and produce actionable intelligence. So that's really kind of the crux of what IoT is doing. So you ask, what should security practitioners do? Really what it comes down to is layering security and understanding what IoT is and what are the security challenges. Because what it really boils down to is IoT networks and existing IT networks are not separate and distinct so much. I mean, physically speaking they are, but really IoT really requires your existing IT network. So it's adjunct to it and really relies on it in a lot of ways. And that's really what security practitioners need to understand, is that if you have an OT network or an operational technologies network, you have those things. There's a DMZ that's separating them, but at the end of the day, that OT network is actually linking back into your IT network. So you still have to have some methodologies for security control.
Now we're in RSA Conference 2014 in San Francisco. Obviously there's big buzzwords every year. We've heard BYOD, we've had big data, and obviously there's a lot of talk regarding the threats associated with these buzzwords. When it comes to IoT, what are some of the threats associated with it?
Well, what it really comes down to is IoT, for all the great things it's going to do for business, has some pretty significant security challenges as well. And it's funny you mentioned BYOD, because what I usually explain to customers when they say, okay, what is IoT? I explain it's like BYOD on steroids. Because prior to BYOD, security professionals, relatively speaking, had kind of a relatively easy life, because everything was in the nice, safe constructs of their network. And everything inside that network, they owned. They own the image. They can actually push security policies to it. They can do pretty much anything they wanted to because they owned and controlled that device. BYOD comes along, and all of a sudden, I don't necessarily own that device, so I can't legally look into it. I can't push policies to it, but yet I still have to enable it and allow it on my network. And that causes me a new threshold of pain and a new threshold of challenge. Well, IoT takes that same concept and it really extrapolates it out tenfold. because now all of a sudden you have all these sensors that are billions of them that are in, all spread all throughout the world in both secure and insecure environments. So we can have sensors all along the side of the road that are used by mapping applications or weather forecasting applications, for example. And those things are now in a very, very insecure location where some guy in a pickup truck with a beer in one hand and a screwdriver in the other can actually infiltrate your security. They don't have to have skills anymore. They don't actually have to even take a lot of risk trying to infiltrate either technically or even a low-tech hack getting into the environment itself. I pull off to the side of the road and I can actually hack it. And it's anything that's networked is a link in the chain. And the proverbial chain is only as strong as its weakest link certainly applies here. So that's one of the biggest challenges. But the other piece is, again, one of the big powers of IoT is the fact that software applications in the IoT world are no longer these monolithic applications that do one thing and behave exactly the same way no matter what's going on in the world. The IoT applications actually are really small from a client-side perspective. They're just a few bits. Their sole purpose in life is to take, basically, essentially be consumers of the intelligence that's being generated and communicated by all these billions of sensors and other smart objects, and take it and now behave differently, change their behavior based on what's going on in the physical world. So that intelligence actually drives our behavior. Well, the problem and the challenge that actually makes for our security professionals is those IoT-enabled applications are in the core of my network. Whereas these IoT sensors, smart objects, etc., these billions of things are traditionally outside the confines of my network. So all of this data, all this intelligence is going through my network in order to populate the applications. That actually, if I'm a security professional, that's keeping me up at night.
Well, certainly a very interesting technological phenomenon in its novice stage, and we'll see where this is all headed soon.
Absolutely.
Jeff Aboud, Technology and Solutions Evangelist at Cisco, thank you so much for being in focus with us
Absolutely.
today.
Thank you.